Hey everyone, welcome. Dominic DeSouza here with Silhouettes of the Truth, very first episode. Pumped to be joined by Pedro Gabriel. Pedro, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
No, it's fun to get this off the ground with you. So, Silhouettes of the Truth, it's the show about Catholic fiction for ordinary modern authors. Although really is any author ever actually ordinary? We talk creed, craft, and co creation rooted in grit, grace, gods, and dragons. Please press like and subscribe to this channel. I'm your host, Dominic DeSouza, longtime novelist, lover, and all around Catholic creative, founder of CatholicAuthor. We're here to inspire your faith and your fiction. Pedro, if you were to summarize yourself in about a minute, what would you say? And especially as it relates to you being an author.
Well, regarding me being an author, I would describe myself as a myth lover and a myth maker. Yeah, I love myth since when I remember, and I like the fact that even though in these days myth is considered a synonym of false, something that is a lie, something that is not true, I like the fact that myth is actually a silhouette of truth. It contains truth in a hidden way, in a sophisticated way. So I love myth, and I decided that I don't want just to consume myths. I want to produce them. I
So
want
before
to get.
getting into the book, it's like tell us about how did what were some of your early myths that you really loved, and what kind of books did you enjoy reading? Like how did you become a self-published author now? You've published the book Ironcraft. We'll get into that in a second. Tell us about your journey as an author.
Well, I've been writing since very early. I was writing short stories at 6 years of age, and I finished my first novel at 15 years of age. Uh, and precisely at that time, I decided that I wanted to try some kind of more serious literature, and I decided to start with the beginning, which is the Iliad, and I got hooked. I got hooked. Even before I started reading the Iliad, I always liked the movies that were not too realistic. I liked the movies that had a certain fantasy component to it. I liked to have to imagine scenarios and to imagine. I liked when those movies brought me to a completely different landscape. I wanted to have the wings of my imagination just set free. And in the Iliad, I got my first taste of myth. Then I went on to the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and I started to, you know, I started to read voraciously myths. I would know the names of the Greek gods and the Greek heroes as my other fellows would say the names of Pokemon or something like that.
Mhm.
So, and from then I went to Egyptian mythology, Mesopotamian mythology. Those three are the ones that I enjoy the most.
Fantastic.
But already in my adulthood, I got into contact with Tolkien, first with the movies, The Lord of the Rings, the trilogy. I didn't know Tolkien at that time. It was my first taste of Tolkien. And then I decided to explore Tolkien. I read the Silmarillion, and I thought, hey, I can actually do my own. So
Yeah.
yeah, so from that point onward, I decided that it would be my dream to create a mythology on my own terms, based on my own message, on my own concerns, and my own creativity, and start from creation and end in the apocalypse.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's not ambitious at all, is it?
Okay, maybe that it's a dream. I think
Yeah,
if dreams should be ambitious.
that's
It's
brilliant.
not just a project; it's
Yeah.
a dream. And
No, I think that's great. Well, let's talk about the book then. And for those who are watching us live, welcome. If you have a question for Pedro, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat. We have someone who's already saying hi, so welcome to James Interviews. Thanks for watching. Again, if you have a question, drop it in the chat. We will bring it up, or we can bring them on later on. So, Pedro, let's talk about Ironcraft and the Chronicles of Dumah. Take it away. What is this, and how did you come up with it?
it's precisely the materialization of that dream of mine. I decided to create that world, and I called it Duma, because that's the Hebrew word for silence. And I was actually, it has a more complicated backstory, which is it ties with my apologetics actually.
Oh, really?
There's a part, there's an argument from atheists and other people who are not orthodox secularists that has me kind of stumped, which is why does God seem to be silent in the middle of so much suffering and so much evil and whatnot? I've been able to answer a lot of apologetics on many topics, but that one always leaves me kind of stumped because it's difficult. It's a difficult matter to tackle, and I'm a person who deals with that silence throughout all my day. I'm an oncologist.
I imagine that brings up a lot of very difficult questions.
Yeah. So, and I thought this is not the kind of thing that you tackle with rational arguments. This is something that must be existential, that must be lived, and it's too much nuanced to be just a set of arguments, a checklist of arguments and counter arguments. And so I think that the best way to relay to people who do not understand the things that I'm trying to explain is through story. Is through story. And so I decided to create these Chronicles of Silence, and try to make
That's why you named it that. Okay.
Yeah, and try to make these stories on several topics about that, in which God is kind of absent, but it's also kind of present, but you need to be very sensitive to it. And the things just start unfolding from there. This is the first installment. It deals mostly with the fall, and because if I'm going to start a mythology, I have to also tackle the question of the fall. The world is created good in the beginning, but then it starts, evil enters into the world. So
and again, very briefly, for those watching who are still learning about Ironcraft, it's I think you've said it in kind of a sort of alternate fantasy history that's part of our ancient past, and it has to do with a little bit after the creation of the world. It's a world of giants and stars.
I wouldn't say that it's from our past. It's actually a world created from scratch, more like an alternate dimension. It's
like
not
a Narnia kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not our actual history, but it is the history of a completely different, separate world.
Okay.
It's the question of co-creation. It's a concept from Tolkien that we participate in the creative. We are made in the image and likeness of God, and God is a creator. So we, as his creatures made in his image and likeness, cannot stop creating. And one of the instances that of that creation is this co-creation. We can create our own worlds
Mm-hmm.
by taking resource to art, movie, books, etc. We can create our own world. It's our co-creation, and by that we kind of participate in God's creative power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the metaphor of God as a writer of our stories actually helps me understand a lot about these existential questions that a person might have. It's precisely because I am kind of a god to my own universe that I can understand some things that God does in our own universe, and that can be kind of strange if a person does not think of it in these terms, right? So a story needs, if the characters are to be developed, if the characters are to learn something or do something valuable, if the story is to progress, there needs to be conflict, there needs to be some kind of lack, some kind of evil, some kind of, otherwise it's not a story, it's just, you can call it maybe a painting, but it's not a story, right? That's why.
So give us a quick overview then of where Dumah goes. Whoops. So what is your first book? You said it's the first installment, and you've called it Ironcraft.
Yes.
I read through it, and it feels kind of like reading the Silmarillion, I guess. And it covers the space of, gosh, was it decades or a century? I know there's several lifetimes in there.
Yes, but the characters at that time, yeah, they live a long time. Precisely, a world that is still fresh has lots of life in it. So the cycles of life are very large. I drew some inspiration also from the book of Genesis. We have the giants from the book of Genesis, and we have the primordial men. Before the flood, they would live centuries. They would live much more than human beings today. So I drew also inspiration from that. Yeah. And it also gives them a greater aura of fantasy. Precisely, they can live through ages. So that.
And then within the first couple of chapters, you have this sylphid. What is a sylphid, and what does she end up prompting in the first sort of third of the book to happen?
Yeah, the sylphs are a creature from the legendarium, mostly European. They are usually spirits of the air. They are in the wind, they are in the breeze. But I decided to become a little bit more creative and just associate the sylphs to all the elements. And this sylphid comes from the skies, comes from the stars. There are sylphids in the there are sylphs in the stars, sylphs in the air, sylphs in the water. This sylphid comes from the stars, and she brings a prophecy, a message to the giants, the beings made of flesh that inhabit the world at the time. And she brings this prophecy that says that there's going to be a new race, the race of men, the race of human beings, that will be brought forth in the space of a few generations. And this new race is going to dethrone the giants. It's going to destroy the giants, destroy their culture, destroy everything that has to do with giant kind. So the giants now have to protect themselves against this future menace. And the story dwells precisely in how they respond to this prophecy from the stars.
Wow. Well, I don't want to give away the end here, so people have to go check it out. Where's the book available? by the way?
The book is available at this moment in Amazon. It is in ebook format, and it is in paperback format. I am working on seeing if I can expand to other formats and to other platforms, but for now, in Amazon, in ebook and paperback.
Nice, nice. So a couple of other then little questions for you. What is next for you now that you've published it? What have you been working on? Have you had time to even think about the next book
I've
yet, or is
been
it
doing so
giving you
many.
extra energy?
Yeah, I've been doing so many things. As I told you in a recent interview, I'm also going to publish an apologetics book very soon, The Orthodoxy of Amoris Laetitia, tackling the arguments that say that Amoris Laetitia is not orthodox, at least not in the way that Pope Francis said that we should interpret it. And from then, let's see. I wish, as a writer, to keep producing other books, both in apologetics and continue the Chronicles of Dumah.
Nice.
Let's see what comes first. But I have many ideas. It's now just a matter of putting them into practice, both in the apologetics and in the fiction. And the fiction is mostly try to continue the Chronicles of Dumah for now.
Well, I think that's really fun because it lets people know that, well, you intend to keep returning to the world, and it's not necessarily a one and done thing. So that's a fun reason to go check you out. Your website is the Dumah Project.
Yeah, the doomproject.com is the website from the Chronicles of Dumah. But I am just now finishing my own writer's website that will be kind of a hub, both to the Dumah, to the other fiction, to the nonfiction, to the apologetics. It's pedrogabrielwriter.com.
Nice. Well, good. We'll put that in the show notes here. I'm curious to ask a sort of tangential. Well, it's the next segment. Favorite legend, favorite ancient story. Maybe something that kind of inspired this or something, but maybe as a child or growing up. What was your favorite legend?
My favorite legend, or rather my favorite myth, is the myth of Cupid and Psyche. It's also a Greek myth. I like it. Myth is a way to convey difficult, complex truths in a very sophisticated way. And if you think about it, so Cupid is love and Psyche is the soul. So I don't know if people are familiar with this story, but it's basically that Psyche is a woman, a very beautiful woman, and then she gets married to supposedly a monster. She doesn't know who he is. She doesn't see him because it's one of the conditions that she must never see him at all. So one night she's too curious and she breaks that vow. She goes with a candle to see his face, and she sees that he's not a monster at all. He's Cupid, is love. He's the most beautiful being that exists. And then she falls in love with him, but precisely because she broke the vow, Cupid is forced to flee away. And then she has to go through a series of trials to go back to her loved one, to her beloved. And that's interesting. So the soul searches for love. That's what she is. The soul is teleologically conditioned to search for, and she goes through all these obstacles, through all these trials to find love. But she only does it after she had a small taste of it, but because before, the soul might actually be frightened. The soul is being forced to give herself up for someone that she doesn't even know, some obscure entity that asks everything of her. But as soon as she gets that small taste, then she gets hooked. But that's also the time when love becomes elusive, and she has to search for it and deserve it and win it over.
Wow. I've grown up reading that but never slowed down in later years to rethink more of the deeper meaning of that. That's great. So, okay, let's move into world building. How have you been building this world? As you mentioned, it's almost a completely new creation. It takes some inspiration from our ancient past, but tell us about your world building. What is it? What is that like?
Well, the world is being built as we speak, and actually, I decided to start building from the beginning at the actual creation of the world. Not because I would make a book out of the creation, but because I decided that I didn't want to just go into a stage of the myth and then get stuck because I didn't build enough until then,
Gotcha.
and I couldn't go retroactively have to erase plot holes that I created. So I decided to start in the beginning, and so there is creation, which does not feature in Ironcraft, but it will probably be released as small short stories as the Dumah, as the Chronicles of Dumah keep going forward. Actually, Ironcraft was also supposed to be one of these first stages of the world building, of the myth building at this moment. But as I started writing, it just took a life of its own, and I said to myself at a certain point, no, this is not going to be just the framework of a future novel. This is a story in itself, and so it is. Now, if the world of Dumah is much bigger than what we see in Ironcraft. Ironcraft takes place in a very small segment of that planet, of that world. The giants are barred from going further by a curse, which will become manifest both to people who know of the creation of the earlier parts of the story and in the later parts of the story. But that big expanse of land that we see is just a small part of the whole. I already have the whole designed, but
Wow.
That's for the other stories to come.
Do you actually like drawing maps, or is it all listed out somewhere? How do you tackle that?
The maps are drawn at this moment in a schematic way.
Okay.
I will draw them in a more bookish kind of way as I need them, but I have them in a schematic way to know where each thing is going to take place, what's the relative positions of each city, of each of each population, each country, those kinds of things.
No, that's great. Hey, okay, so tell us about your process of writing a novel. What has worked for you to stay focused, to get it done? Is it something you put in a little bit of time every day? Do you have a favorite playlist? Do you use a particular tool? How did you make it work for you?
Well, okay, so I think that I do not write every day, but I do something every day. It does not need to be a writing. Sometimes I may be writing apologetics, or I may be drawing the maps, or I may be doing other things. But every single day, I either do something or I imagine something. It's not particularly difficult because I really, really love doing this. Is the greatest challenge is to actually if sometimes find time to be able to do all the things that I need to do. But since since it's something that a person likes, eventually they come forth. I don't have any other thing, not a particular playlist. There are songs that inspire certain scenes or certain characters, but I usually listen to those musics not while I'm writing, but when I'm imagining.
Gotcha.
uh, yeah, the writing, I need to be more focused.
Mhm.
um, yeah, but I think that there are that writers are divided between the supposed the idea is that they are divided between plotters and
And
pantsers.
Pensers, yeah, exactly.
I don't know how a person can be a pantser. I could never do that. But if it works, good for you. But it just shows that every person has its own method. I
Mhm.
need to have everything delineated before
Mhm.
going into it. As you can see, I have already written many pages of backstory that doesn't even feature into the first novel, just
Wow.
so that I know that so that I just know that I did not miss anything, so
Mhm.
that things can develop more organically. And my
Wow.
method, basically imagining and reimagining the story. I like to play it all over and over in my head while I'm
Mhm.
driving, while I'm in bed, while I'm idle. Um, and then when it's finally time for it to come out, it will come out naturally.
That's great. Well, in beginning to wrap up, the last segment I want to ask you about here is um, Catholic authors very much about helping modern fiction writers, and I love what you've done. The theme of your novel, as you've mentioned, um, how do I say, approaching a very difficult question or recognizing there's this very difficult question a lot of people have. Um, and there's a lot of reasons why they have these questions. And so you're stepping back and you're not actually answering that question. You're stepping back to kind of go around it and deepen or broaden or kick in the walls for a whole bunch of other things. And then people can then maybe come back and re-engage with that question and realize they're in a different place. And that's very much the kind of thing that Catholic authors is here to help
Yeah,
encourage
I think
curious.
that this question in particular that I'm trying to answer, this question, the problem is precisely that this question does not have an answer. This question has to be lived
Mm,
if you want to answer it. It's not a Q&A kind of thing, not like Jeopardy. It's something that you either live it or you don't understand it.
mhm,
But how can I make someone live it? Maybe through making that person get out of the shell of his own self and project himself into a completely different person, because we are more objective when we are third person view,
mhm,
in third person view.
mhm,
When the suffering or whatever it is, it's crushing us, it's more difficult for us to see. It's normal, it's natural, it's human. But when we are actually looking through the eyes of a third person to another person, it's easier for us to understand. So
mhm.
maybe this can help a bit. I hope so. At least it helps me also, because
Yeah.
it's a way of a person to do his or her own catharsis, right?
Mhm.
uh, I would have to write these stories even if no one would read them, but I hope that people would read them, because I think it
Sure.
would be very enriching
Mhm.
for all of us to share these stories.
No, I think that's great. I think that's great. And I love the fact that there's this, even if it's not explicit. And as I read through it, now that you mention it, I can begin to see how you're sketching this out or circling this. But it wasn't actually clear, which was great because it allows people to stay focused on the story and not get distracted by the underlying theme or the underlying message. Um,
Uh,
in wrapping up here, go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
as I said, Ironcraft is still the first installment. Many things that are not clear at this moment will become clarified at a later stage. That's also the point. At this moment, the world is still not very mature. It's still a little fairy tale-y. This is going to change, and the fact that the world has this kind of whimsical tone to it, it's intentional. But
See, I think it's funny that you say that, because those last chapters were like they were massive. That was like the Siege of Gondor in there, and anyhow, of course, you'd expect that from a fantasy epic. So I'm not really giving anything away, but so again, in wrapping up, if you had a message for modern, like young modern Catholic fiction authors, or even not so young, people are having that story and wanting to write it, if you had a minute to share a word of encouragement or insight with them, what would you like to say?
Well, as I said, with the plotters versus pantsers dichotomy, there's no single answer. There's no, on the technical part or in that objective part, there's no single answer except for one, which is my advice is just be true to yourself. Don't you will have to perfect yourself through experience. I have been writing since I was 15 years of age, and I can notice a big development from that time until now. And even now, I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. So I still have many things that I need to perfect. But the perfection will come with experience. The techniques will come with experience. There's no other way. You can listen to podcasts, videos, whatever, and try to implement those advices, but only when you actually try them in your own writing will you start becoming more acquainted with them. So what needs to stay, what needs to remain constant is that you remain true to yourself, regardless of your technical expertise on these matters. Just write something that you think you would like to write. Do not write to convince others of something. Do not write to just sell. Do not write to please others. Imagine if I were a writer, if I were a reader and I had a book in front of me that I wanted to buy, and this book is the book that is perfect for me, what would it be like? And just stay true to that, because if it's better to write a book that is not the type of every person, but every person can notice that you put your heart into it, than something that might be theoretically pleasing to others, but it's not honest. That dishonesty will shine through the words that you write, as much as you try to disguise it. Just be honest with yourself. Write what you want to write. One of the things that I noticed when I wrote Ironcraft was precisely this. I don't know if people are going to enjoy it. I hope that they will, but I know that if I hadn't written this book, I would have liked to read it.
It's
the kind of book that I would like to read. And from that point onward, I think that other people will also be able to enjoy it.
I think that's great. Good for you. Good for you. And I strongly recommend that too. Don't write for the money. Because if you do, it shows. Write because you love it. And that will actually sustain you, especially when you get to the 40% mark and then the 65% mark. And those are the hardest parts of any novel. Thanks again for coming on today, Pedro. It was good to chat with you. And then for those who are catching this replay, please press like and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with the one friend that you think would like to see it. Catholic Author is a project by smart Catholics, and you're invited to join the creative community for the modern Catholic author. We're helping Catholic authors grow, connect, and keep writing. Sign up today at CatholicAuthor.us. Till next time, keep writing. Thanks again, everyone. God bless.